When I heard God speak to me, my life changed completely because there was a God that I knew cared for me, loved me, and was a personal relationship. And that personal relationship of care and concern, trying to meet 1,000 things that happen to all of us, has been very, very real in so many ways. It would be about, let's see, 20 years ago, we got a call from our daughter, Laura, my daughter. She was down in southern Ohio, working for Mead Paper Company out in the field. Had tremendous headaches, and they couldn't solve anything for her there, so we put her on an airplane and flew her back to Chicago. Got to a doctor who said she's got a brain tumor and we have to operate. So we put everything together. Laura went on down, and about 2 hours after the our operation had started, I was up in a room with most of the families, including the ex-wife. And the doctor walks in and takes his face mask off, and he says, I'm sorry to say that we can't operate on it. We've opened her up, and the tumor is in such a situation that we don't dare touch it because it could destroy all brain action. And the bottom kind of dropped right out of me at that point in time. All of a sudden, about an hour after that, as I'm trying to straighten the various parts of the family out, a fellow shows up there by the name of Hal Edwards, and Hal and I had been friends for about 25 years. He came to Chicago to start, that's God's willing, by the way, to a man there, to get small groups started, because God's message to him was that his message was being lost, and small groups were the way to be able to rebuild that. So Hal had been directing that. He just happened to drop by the hospital and find out I was there, so we went to one of my daughter's apartments there, and boy, I was bottom out. There wasn't any God for me. And by the time Hal got me settled down, in about 3 hours or so, God came so much alive that we were able to come back and get Laura into numbers of situations. She actually was put into the place down at the University of Chicago where the atomic bomb was developed, and they were using some of that for infusion and helping to cure that tumor. Well, long of the short was she made another 5 years. At age 29, just a week before her 30th birthday, I was holding her hand. She was living with us in the house we had up in Chicago, and she passed on. And here's this lovely little lady. She was lying there very quietly, took a little breath, stopped breathing, and I'm sitting there holding her hand, and we're singing. There's a group of about 6 about her. And her eyes kind of opened, and I said, my gosh, she's still alive. And the nurse said, no, that's just reaction. So God just entered that whole situation at that time, gave me and Joanne peace. It was helpful trying to reach our family, which is now these girls are out working. Put it all together and got her back. And Laura was buried, but her spirit has been with us ever since, and I know that she's alive. Some years later, in fact, just 2 years ago, my younger daughter, Sarah, who had been married for a little over 20 years and had developed some very severe arthritic problems and was just barely mobile, could use her hands a little bit, and had been very sick. Got her up to Mayo Clinic, and they cured her. We got her back home, and then all of a sudden they got a call from her husband they lived in the northwest suburb of Chicago, that she was really pretty ill and back in the hospital. And one of our older daughters lives up there and went down to the hospital to stay with her, but she passed that night. And we got in an airplane and that, with a lot of trouble, arrived in Chicago. It was about 7 degrees below zero. I got up to Libertyville, where Sarah was there at a funeral home, and it was almost impossible for me. I was sitting there with her in a casket right up there to go see her. I waited till almost everybody was out of there, and knowing that most of my family still hadn't arrived, the daughters and whatever, just pleaded with God, God, will you give me the strength so that I can, direction so that I can handle this with him. And I went up and I looked at this beautiful little blonde lady sitting there quietly, and kissed her cold forehead, and then as I was turning away from her and walking down, I just got this clear message that she's alive, she's well, and she's walking again. She's going to be able to play the piano. And it was just a personal message to me, and it just turned me around completely again. And I was able to meet the rest of those the family and friends that showed, and the rest of the daughters, with that tremendous peace, knowing that Sarah indeed is there, and the older I get, and that was 86 yesterday. I know I'm getting closer and closer to the time where we can renew acquaintances. Well, that's an awful lot to say in a short time, and there's been so many instances where we've seen God working. And I'm so pleased to be able to sit here and be on for a little bit to tell you that God has been very much a part of our lives through thick and thin with those 7 wonderful girls. And I could fill a couple books with stories there, but you fed enough of me. And I would praise you and thank you and ask that if there's some uncertainty in your lives, just turn it to God, and God's there to answer you because you are his lovely person. Thank you. I am Jim Roberts, and that is how faith works for me.